And that I understand that I have approximately 30 minutes to talk. If that, and if that is correct, I'll talk for 20 minutes and have 10 minutes Q&A at the end if you'd like.
Perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome. I'll start talking now and we'll get that PowerPoint presentation, and it's just on a loop, as I said. You know, okay, yeah, Lou needs the screen share capability. The true history of indigenous people has never been told. It has been, and the true history has been ignored, forgotten, and erased by all institutions, the schools, the state departments, etc. It's just been ignored, and the church. Our tribe experienced 3 brutal periods of colonization, brutal colonization, and the goal of that colonization was to ignore, was to erase and exterminate our tribal culture, our tribal spirituality, our tribal environments, our tribal indigenous knowledge that had been handed down for thousands of years, and even the humanity of our people. There was an effort to exterminate us. The Greater Bay Area of Monterey, which includes the San Jose and Silicon Valley areas of today, was the most populated of indigenous people north of Mexico City. It was more populated than any territory, than anywhere else in the United States and or Canada. And we just, it was the most populated of indigenous people. But yet, when you look at today, what happened to all of these people? Where are they? Well, our history shows us that under the mission period, our numbers were reduced by over 150,000 people. And that was approximately 1/3 of the population of California, California. And that was the indigenous, and that number, 150,000, that was a statewide number, by the way. It was estimated that there were 300,000 Indians in California, and the mission period, resulted in the death of 150,000. When the Indians first came into the missions, they would send soldiers out to capture them, and they would target the women. And then they would march the women back to the missions. They knew that the children would naturally follow their mothers, and they would walk with the mothers to the missions where they were being, where they were forced to go. And they knew it was just a matter of a short period of time before the men would come in to be with the women and with their families. At the missions, they separated the men from the women from the children. That was for the purpose to try and force assimilation and force conversion to accept and become citizens of Spain and to live life as Spaniards. They also tried to force them to become Christians and accept the Christian faith and forget everything else about that their people have learned over thousands and thousands of years. Once at the mission, they could not speak their language. They could not, they could not hold their ceremonies. They could not pass that indigenous knowledge down to the children. And one of the reasons they separated them is the only reason that way that family could ever come back together again is if they agreed to accept that assimilation and conversion. Then they could be back together with their families again. But if they refused to accept that, then their families could never get back together. I said the missions were brutal. At Mission Santa Cruz, for example, life expectancy for the Indians that were taken there was less than 2 years. At Mission San Juan Bautista, just 36 years after the mission opened, the priest reported that 19,421 Indians had died there. There was a questionnaire that was sent out, and they reported that 19,421 Indians had died at Mission San Juan Bautista alone. This is a horrible experience at the missions. That mission period was followed by the Mexican period. The Mexican period, Jenny, you have your hands up. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free. So the Spanish period, what they did is they gave people from Mexico a huge land grant so they could come on up here and come to the United States and start populating it, because the Indians were not converting as they wanted. So they started bringing Mexicans from Mexico up so that they would become the citizens of California. And when they came here, they developed these huge ranchos. There was no labor force here. So it was slavery. It was slavery that they used the Indians for. The same as the missions. I didn't talk about that. The missions, you were nothing but a slave system. Once they're there, the Indians could not leave. Once they came to the Mexican ranchos, they could not leave. The other thing that happened is they thought our grazing grasses were inferior. So they bring in their oats, their alfalfa, their barley, etc. And those plants right there, they grew very quickly. They did not establish the deep root systems that our native plants did. They grew very fast, but that quickly shaded out our native plants, and our native plants quickly disappeared because they were shaded out. And that was followed by the American period. The very first governor of the state of California, Peter J. Burnett, in the very first State of the Union, he said that there will be a war of extermination against the California Indians. That is to be expected. And with that, they pay bounties of 25 cents to $5 for every dead Indian that any citizen, non-Indian, could collect. They paid bounties. And they also paid militias to hunt down the Indians and to kill them. There's one person, John Fremont. He was a commander of one of the militias. And he had a number of huge massacres. As a matter of fact, he's responsible for the largest single-day massacre of of Indians in the United States. In one day, he killed over 1,000 Indians, mostly women and children, about 60 miles north of Sacramento on the Sacramento River. Yet his deeds, we have a town named after him. We have mountains and roads and schools honoring and remembering his greatness and his pioneering spirit for all the accomplishments and good that he did to California. But all he did was massacre Indian children and women mostly. And that earned him that spot in history. During the California period, they also passed laws that legalized the kidnapping of children. They would shoot the parents, take the children, and sell them. Boys would sell for $150 typically. Girls would sell for $300. When the soldiers came in under the Spanish period, and whenever the Mexican people came for those ranches, they did not bring their wives. They did not bring wives or female companionship. And so they were buying these little girls for sexual reasons. That's the history of California, of Mexican and mission period. Today, our tribe is struggling to have the true history told. During those 3 periods of colonization, our population was reduced by over 98%. We were, you know, and the way that we survived is we said, we're not Indian, we're Mexican, because the mission taught us to speak Spanish and they gave us Mexican surnames. And so we went with that just to survive. Our tribe formed an official government under the requirements of the federal government, of the United States government, to form a democratic government, which we've done. Well, I want to say one other thing. Our tribe signed a treaty. You know, most people know that we are a federally unrecognized tribe. Our tribe signed a treaty in 1851. The state of California sabotaged that treaty. They passed a resolution asking the US Senate and the president to not ratify those treaties. And then after that was signed, after that resolution was signed, they sent a delegation to lobby against the signing of that. With that, the president ordered that those treaties be sealed for 50 years. And our treaty was never ratified, but we're unrecognized today because of the actions of the state of California. It's important to people understand that. A lot of people think that we're not Indian enough, we're not worthy, we're not true Indians and stuff like that because they say we're unrecognized. But it was the state of California that sabotaged our treaties. Today, we're fighting hard to restore our indigenous knowledge, and we're doing it mostly related to land stewardship and land stewardship and to restoring the indigenous knowledge of how to take care of the rivers, the waterways, etc., of our ancestors. We established the Yamamutsun Land Trust in 2012. The four goals of our land trust are first to preserve and protect our sacred and cultural locations. There's very few of them remaining because most of them have already been developed over, paved over, and destroyed. There's very few of them left. But some do, but a few do remain, and I'll talk about one very important one in a minute. The second goal of our land trust is to do research to learn about how our ancestors stewarded and took care of the lands, do research related to the true history of our people, do history to restore our knowledge of our plants, for example, our food plants, our medicine plants, our basketry plants, our plants for women's care, our plants for baby care, etc. We're restoring that knowledge. Our third goal is education, educating our tribal members and educating the public about who we are and how our ancestors took care of Mother Earth and how important that knowledge is to address the issues of climate change, for example. And that's being recognized today. Our tribe participates in many in many conferences and stuff on climate change. And people are turning to indigenous knowledge to help us deal with that. A good example there is fire, or knowledge of having cultural burns. There's a lot of efforts to bring back those cultural burns today. And then the fourth reason is to have stewardship. Currently, we have 10 native stewards working on the lands to restore the coastal prairie that was existed along the entire coast of the greater Monterey Bay area. That was a coastal prairie, and it was recognized as the most biodiverse landscape in North America. But once they stopped fire, and all three of those periods of colonization outlawed fire, once they did that, the shrubs move in, and then the trees move in, and that coastal prairie and the diversity were nearly gone, and we're bringing that back today. The reason we're here today, as I said, when one of the first goal I mentioned is preserve and protect our cultural sites. And our most important sacred site was Juristac and is Juristac. That's at the very tail end of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And that is at the southern point of Gilroy, where the 101 and Highway 129 meet. That is where, and it would be the north and west quadrant there, and that right there would be Juristac. And we're going to show a map of that in just a little bit. Our tribe has, our people had ceremony there, had prayer there for thousands and thousands of years. But then we were removed from that when the missions came, and we have not been on that land since that time. And we've requested quite often to be able to go onto that land for ceremony, for prayer. And we're denied that every time we ask. And to this day, we ask for access to that for prayer and ceremony, and we're denied. In 2015, there was a proposal to do sand and gravel mining. And they want to tear down 4 of our most sacred mountains and just put a huge pit in the ground and take, I forget how many billions of tons of sand out of there. And we're fighting hard to stop that. And we're told the only thing that's going to prevent that mining pit from being approved is overwhelming public support. And that's why we speak out on this every day and at every opportunity that we have, to ask the public to support our efforts to stop the destruction of Juristac. Lou, can you put up that graphic that you have on Juristac that points that out where it is and where the mining project is going to occur? Can you get that up, please? What they applied for that grant, for that mining permit in 2015. We heard about that right away, and our tribal council passed a resolution asking the county to deny it. And there's a new law, a fairly new law, Assembly Bill 52, AB 52, that requires local governments to consult with tribes prior to releasing the draft environmental impact report to learn if there's any cultural sensitivity or importance to that site. And we met quite a number of times with the county. We requested consultation, and they met quite a few times with the county. And we requested that they conduct an ethnographic study, which they did. And that ethnographic study shows this to be a very important and very significant site. What we worry about, though, is the public may not learn of that significance because we have a confidentiality agreement tied to that ethnographic study. And so we're going to have to rely on the county giving a good summary of what's in that report for people to understand how important Juristac is to us. So we wanted to give you 20 minutes is not a long time, and I'm going to wrap up now. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about who our tribe is and who, where we, our history and what we do today. I should say that today we have access to 140,000 acres in our tribal territory, from state parks, national parks, Bureau of Land Management, Mid-Peninsula Open Space District, I'm forgetting the names of the other organizations, but I'm sorry about that. But we have access to that, and they recognize, and are allowing us to do the stewardship, the research, and the restoration work that we're doing, and they support us. And then when you look at our website at protectjuristac.org, and Juristac is spelled Juristac, when you look at our website, you will see the letters of support that we have there, and they are significant letters, and they're from the local communities, statewide and national communities, and international communities. They represent, the spiritual communities, because our Native American spirituality has never been respected. There, I see the link on the very bottom in the chat there. Thank you, Jenny. There's a lot of information there, and we encourage you to go. I'll stop there so we can have time for questions, if there are any.
If anybody would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand or post in the chat. And if you're having technical problems, you can also feel free to just unmute yourself and speak. My question is about how we can take action. The website is really fantastic and has a good section on how people can help. I'm particularly interested in the environmental impact report that should be coming out to the county. It should be reviewed at the county level soon. I'm wondering, my experience in getting people to speak at county meetings is that sometimes they don't agendize it until the last minute, and it can be kind of hard to rally people. So I'm just wondering if you have a timeline for that or any recommendations how we might be able to move quickly when that comes up.
Thank you for that question, Jenny. We learned today, we were being told that the draft EIR was going to come out at the end of this month. And we learned just today that it will probably be later than that. They're hoping to get it out by the end of the year, but it could go into 2022 before it comes out. So that's the kind of the latest update for that. We have a strong committee or committed group to assist us getting the word out and to try and coordinate a lot of the comments coming in and to identify people with various expertise related to the draft environmental impact report, because there are a lot of conservation issues. Every conservation organization in Santa Clara County supports the protection of Juristac. But there's wildlife corridors, wildlife, protected wildlife species there, plant populations that are very, very rare and need protection. There's issues related to the water because it takes a lot of water to wash and cleanse the sand, and they use a lot of chemicals there. So there's a lot of potential, contaminants going into the groundwater there. And there's just a lot of issues like that. So we have a lot of scientists. We have over 270 university scientists with expertise in a lot of various subjects willing to write letters in response to the draft EIR. By the way, we have UC Berkeley, UC Santa Cruz, UC Santa Clara University, San Francisco State University, Santa Cruz, San Jose State, and a good number of community colleges support this as well. So if you sign up to receive the notices, we will be putting notices out, Jenny, to let people know immediately what's happening. And we will have a number of public information sessions where we'll invite the public to attend events and stuff like that, to learn about it, and we'll have speakers there talk about it as well. So we do anticipate having a lot of actions at that regarding this, and they're going to get started real soon, but we're waiting for that draft EIR to get out so we can be very specific in the information that we provide.
Thank you. And I see at the Protect Juristac website under how to help, there's a option to sign up for the email list. So that's makes it easy for everyone. I also just want to comment that it's been 7 years that you all have been working on this campaign. I did a 2-year campaign and it felt like an eternity. So I just can't even imagine how challenging it must be. But thank you very much for coming and speaking with us tonight, and your perseverance and continued work on this issue.
Okay, and before I go, I wanted to say hello and thank you to Suds. He's one, recently he is the chair of the Human Rights Commission in Santa Clara County. And recently, the Santa Clara County Human Rights Commission agreed to recognize Juristac as a human rights issue. And they're writing letters to the county planners and to the county board of supervisors of their support as a of this protection as a human rights issue. So thank you very much, Seth.
Yeah, thank you. And also thank you, Lou, for coordinating and helping us put this all together and sharing the slides. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
So I'll do one final last call for questions. Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is from the Save California Solar. Dave Rosenfeld is the executive director of the Solar Rights Alliance. He was referred to us by our environmental committee as a speaker. Dave has been a community organizer for over 20 years and believes people power is the best way to overcome special interests. Prior to joining Solar Rights Alliance, Dave led a successful statewide ballot measure campaign in Oregon to restore career technical education for high schoolers. Before that, he led a 40,000 member public interest organization that successfully worked to reduce health insurance premiums for consumers and combat government corruption. In addition to spending time with his wife and 2 children, he enjoys running, backpacking, and studying science and philosophy. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Dave.
Okay, right. Thank you, Jenny. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for having me here. I'll echo what was just said. I was just listening in on Chair Lopez's presentation, and 2 years, 3 years of a campaign is grueling. So something that's gone on that long. And I agree, that website, I don't think he's on anymore. That's pretty awesome, like well laid out, like the fight, like even just the first time I heard it and just immediately follow the thread and figure out how to plug in. So I'm glad to be on just to have heard that and have another muse to learn from and just how to run effective winning campaigns that make a difference. And obviously it's existential for the tribe. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and just get right into it and do a little presentation and then take questions. So just give me a sec here to, I think I need screen sharing capabilities. Looks like I've got it. Thank you. Give me a sec. I'm going to get it together here. Okay. All right. Can I get just a thumbs up that you can see Save California Solar on your screen? Good. Okay. So we're here to save California Solar. And so just briefly, so I run the Solar Rights Alliance, which is one of the organizations in the Save California Solar campaign. There's about 500 organizations and community leaders. My organization is the Grassroots Nonprofit Association of California Solar Users. We believe you have the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference by the utility. We're mostly volunteer run. I'm the one and only paid staff person. So that's enough of that. That's just a little bit about me. This is what I'm going to offer up as the future. It's here, but we want it bigger. So this is an affordable multifamily home complex. The stereotype of solar is, rich people in Beverly Hills. And 15 years ago, that was rooftop solar. If you wanted to get rooftop solar 15 years ago, you had to be wealthy, very technical, or extremely committed. And today you don't have to be any of those things. There was only 20,000 solar rooftops 15 years ago. Today there's 1.2 million. And just under half of all new solar is going into middle and working class neighborhoods. That's because of policy. It was intentional policy that was laid out by then Governor Schwarzenegger in the legislature and then continued. And so we really launched a market now And in the last few years, we have seen an explosion of rooftop solar on multifamily homes, both market rate and also affordable. And our goal is we'd love to see rooftop solar into the hands of millions and millions and millions of working and middle class households in the coming years. Why do we want that? I think this kind of, I don't assume this is a crowd. I don't really need to go into too much on this, but 4 quick things. One is people should have more control over their energy bills. It used to be kind of the thing of, well, it's just the way things are. Sometimes some people have trouble paying for electricity. We have programs for them, and that's that. We're almost at the point now where the technology is so good and almost ubiquitous that people shouldn't ever have to choose between their utility bill and groceries. So that's reason number 1. Number 2 is blackouts. As long as we are dependent on long distance power lines for some degree of our energy, and as long as global warming continues to happen, so these are 2 absolute guarantees for the near future, then we are going to have rolling blackouts like the ones we've been experiencing for the last few years. And there is no solution to that except to have a critical mass of people in every community who are making their own solar energy, storing it in a battery, and then sharing the excess with the neighborhood and the community. And so that both the individual benefits by keeping the lights on, but also the community. So that's another reason. A third reason is, climate change. So the state, as you know, has a very aggressive plan to get to 100% renewable energy in a very short period of time, and at the same time to electrify, get everyone off of gas cars and into electric cars, get off of gas appliances and into electric appliances. The state has said that in order to do that, we're going to need to triple every form of wind and solar that already exists today. So think of all the wind farms you've driven by, all the solar farms you've driven by, all the rooftop solar that you see in your neighborhood. We have to triple that, and we have to do it really, really fast. So if we don't keep the rooftop solar growing, then that extra energy is going to have to get generated by large-scale wind and solar farms. And I think it was Chair Lopez, I don't know what their experience is with that, but we work a lot with native tribes that have seen already lots of sacred lands cut up and diced and sliced and ruined by large-scale renewable energy development and transmission lines. We need some of this stuff if we're going to tackle climate change. But if we get rid of rooftop solar or keep it from growing, then that stuff is going to rip up even more land. And then obviously the turtles have something to say about that. And then anyone that's really just trying to protect the last remaining open space that we've got available on Mother Earth. And then there's a fourth reason why we ought to keep rooftop solar growing, which is that it financially benefits everybody whether or not they have solar. The reason why is because when you make your own energy at home, you don't use the grid as much. And the particular part of the grid that you don't use as much is the long distance power lines, the stuff that really travels far away. And because of that, you reduce the wear and tear. So we don't have to spend as much on maintenance and on new construction of those long distance power lines. And the most detailed energy modeling that has ever been done on California estimates that we continue to grow rooftop solar and along with large scale renewable energy and other things and optimize it, that'll be $120 billion cheaper over the next 30 years than if we just do it with large scale wind farms and solar farms alone. So we need it all, but rooftop solar and battery storage, if we keep growing it, has all kinds of benefits, including massive financial benefits that basically make it to be like literally $300 per ratepayer per year for the next 30 years. And by the way, this is not a future thing. In 2018 alone, because of rooftop solar and energy efficiency, the state scaled back 20 massive power line projects and saved all ratepayers $2.6 billion that would have been spent building those power lines had we not had the rooftop solar. So this is like a real thing happening now, and the benefits are only going to increase if we keep rooftop solar growing as well. So then the utilities have a different plan. They have proposed to the government, to specifically the California Public Utilities Commission, a plan that would effectively double the cost of rooftop solar. There's two parts of their plan. The first is to hit every solar user with a penalty fee that depends on where you are. But if you're in PG&E, for example, that penalty fee would average about $86 a month just for putting solar panels on your roof. That's the first part of their plan, because it's not good enough just to do that. This is PG&E we're talking about. So the second thing that they are proposing is to slash credit that solar users receive for sharing their extra energy to the grid. And that's called net metering. It's a foundation of the way that solar works, is you basically put a power plant on your roof, for the most part, that just offsets the energy that you're using right there. But a lot of times you produce extra, and that extra then automatically goes out the door or out the meter to your community. And the utility takes that energy and sells it to your neighbors rather than the energy that they're producing from far away. And you get a credit for that. It's a one-to-one credit. And what they want to do is slash that credit down by 80%. So if you take these two things together, then solar goes from basically paying back around like 8 years to more like 20 years. And the whole thing about middle and working class people going solar, it goes away. Nobody's going to get it. It just doesn't make any sense. It would be too expensive. And then we go back to where we were 15 years ago, when the only people that could get solar were wealthy people. So that's what the utilities are proposing. They're proposing it to the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the regulators that deal with energy issues in the state. They were appointed by the governor. Many of the people on the current commission were appointed by Jerry Brown. Some terms are going up, so it's starting to kind of go through the cycle that it usually does. But these are the folks who are in charge of this decision. And they're in the middle of what's called a proceeding. It doesn't really function like legislation. The most technical way I could describe the CPUC proceeding is a little bit like putting a pen in your eye. It's a very arcane, bureaucratic process that generally advantages itself to people who are highly trained lawyers, not so good for the average person. But nonetheless, it's the system we've got. So that's where the actual decision is getting made. But really, this comes down to Governor Newsom. And it comes down to Governor Newsom because the governor appoints members of the CPUC, number one. And number two is that a governor in any state in the United States, and California is no exception, when an agency of the executive branch is about to do something that is at odds with what the governor's agenda is, that governor will often and has the prerogative to step in and put their thumb on the scales. And here we have a governor that has said climate change is one of his priorities. He's hell-bent on accelerating our drive to renewable energy, to electrify, encourage people to get into electric cars. He has absolutely said he feels responsible for ending the cycle of massive rate hikes, blackouts, and all that stuff. And if the CPUC goes ahead with anything close to what the utilities propose and basically closes off rooftop solar and the growth of battery storage, that is at odds with a lot of things that this governor is saying is his priority. And so we want to make that clear to him so there's no confusion, so that he has an incentive both on the merits and politically to step in and at least make his opinion known to the CPUC, which of course we know could have quite a lot of weight. What do the utilities say about all this? Let me just briefly run through that and then I'll take questions. The utilities have a different story, of course. Their story is that for any of you out there that have rooftop solar, that your rooftop solar, you are skipping out on paying your fair share of the grid. You have effectively taken your ball and gone home. You are now effectively you're using the grid, but you're not paying for it. And that little net metering credit that you get for your extra energy, frankly, that extra energy isn't worth a hill of beans. We can get it for cheaper out in the desert. And so you're being effectively subsidized on top of that. And all you people that have rooftop solar tend to be wealthier. And so really, you're just basically taking the ball, going home, and leaving the people that don't have solar picking up the tab. And we need to bring that back into balance. So that's the utility story. And you may be wondering, well, is there any truth to it? No, there isn't. This cartoon is sort of a simple version of that, but I'll do more than just a cartoon, I swear. But this is, really what's going on is they're looking for a scapegoat. But here's the best way to understand what the utilities are saying. The real thing that's driving up our energy bills is long distance power lines. You heard me talk about that before. This year alone, all of us ratepayers are going to be charged $9 billion this year alone to pay for the maintenance and construction of power lines and for wildfire mitigation, which is now a new cost that we have to pay for. And utilities are incentivized to do this. This isn't just like, this is the cost of doing it. The business model of utilities, the deal of being a regulated monopoly in the state of California, is that utilities get a guaranteed profit of 8 to 10% for every dollar they spend building or maintaining long-distance power lines. And that deal has incentivized the utilities to spend enormous amounts of our money over the last 20 years building long-distance power lines. And the trajectory of our rate hikes is directly tied to the trajectory of spending on long-distance power lines. Rooftop solar, in contrast, as I said earlier, reduces the need to have to spend as much on those long-distance power lines, which takes off the table quite a bit of their profits. It doesn't take all of their profits off the table because we need the utilities to build solar farms and wind farms and more transmission because we need all of it. But they want all of it because they are used to being an absolute monopoly of total domination, and they are just unwilling to share the table. And so that's the fight that we're in. And so that's the fight. And screen is just hanging here. I want to just run through a few things just to remind us what this is really about. This is really who's benefiting from net metering today. These are real projects I'm going to zip through. This is a Northern California tribe, the Trinity River Elder Village. This is basically an elder village. These are tribal elders. This is a new housing that was done. You can notice there's no landscaping because when they developed the project, it was a choice between doing the solar and the landscaping. That's how little their budget was. And they chose the solar because it brought their bills down to $5 a month. I'm going to moving on to, this is affordable senior citizen housing in Arcata that's got the solar. This is Farmworker family housing in Oxnard. So the future is millions of people, middle-class people, working-class people, renters, homeowners, being able to make their own energy for the sun, storing it in a battery so they can use it during blackouts and sharing that with the community. The public is totally with us. Poll after poll shows no matter where you are on the political spectrum, people want to see the state encouraging more rooftop solar. The number is now up to almost 500 nonprofit organizations and community leaders that are in the Save California Solar, aligned with Save California Solar campaign and the things that we're trying to do. Our goal is to keep rooftop solar and battery storage growing, grow it more equitably so that more people can see the benefits of it, and also working to make battery storage cheaper so that by the time we get to 2030, 100% of the solar is paired with the battery so we get those extra benefits. We've been running a campaign for several months now, doing lots of different things. Last week we had a flurry of actions that culminated on the sands of Huntington Beach, where we wrote a 300-foot-long message in the sand to the governor. We called it our SOS. And we're now coming down the home stretch where the CPUC is going to make a final decision at the beginning of next year. We are racing to deliver public comments to Governor Newsom and the CPUC. We want to deliver 100,000 of them to the governor on December 8th in Sacramento. So we're at 95,000 as of today. So we're almost there, and we'd love to blow past that. So one of the top things we're asking people to do is to get on and sign the petition and send a public comment in and then share the heck out of it. We're also asking people to call the governor's office early and often. And so we've got a tool where we want basically him to get an escalating number of phone calls and really get this on his radar. And then the final thing is we've got a million other things for people to do who are interested in going and doing more. So let me stop there. And thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Do we have questions? I see Suzanne.
Good evening, Dave. My name is Suzanne Mantelgi-Safakis, and I do understand, and actually thank you for the presentation. I do have a problem, and my problem is solar as a whole is not clean. Manufacturing solar cell, the PVC and the PC boards, which is the printed circuit boards, and the manufacturing it is so filthy that it is a hazard to the environment. And on top of that, the life expectancy of all these solar panels are mostly between 30 to 40 years. So what are we going to do with this disposal of these solar panels that are not usable? And I think that there has been so much emphasis on solar energy that the investment on renewable energy has been so little, because a lot of money has gone into solar panel and so on and so forth. So what I want to understand is, first, what are the plans on the disposal of all these solar panels that are going to be useless in 20 years? As I said, we know the life expectancy is 30 to 40 years. And on top of that, what other investment do you see? Because in the infrastructure bill that just got passed, they have about $90 billion for renewable energy. And where do you see that money going to be spent on? Because I know a lot of companies, the startups, that they are getting into renewable energy, they have a hell of a time, getting on, unless it is solar, they have a hard time getting funding.
Yeah, so let me address this. This is a good question. And I'll just add, it's more than just solar panels in the manufacturing, right? Battery storage also has its own dirtiness to it. You have to mine for different chemicals like lithium. Yeah. So, I mean, I could go on and on. I mean, like, about, so the question really is, are we replacing one dirty thing with another? And, just further digging ourselves into the hole that humanity has already dug, here on Mother Earth. And so here's what I have to say about that is, and I cut my teeth I grew up in New Jersey, so I cut my teeth basically fighting to clean up toxic waste dumps that have been created by an earlier industrial age. So I feel like I do kind of have that perspective of like, what are we doing? Let's think long term. So so I've looked into this myself, and I felt like I needed to do this due diligence before I was going to jump into a fight like this. And so here's really kind of what it comes down to is there's short term and then there's long term. Short term, when you compare the relative dirtiness of solar and battery storage with fossil fuels and climate change, it doesn't even compare. So that's, I think, the first thing is we're cooked if we don't aggressively get stopped. We had to stop burning 10 years ago, and we got to replace that energy with something. And we also have to store it in order to be able to make it work. And so when you kind of look at just the relative hazards to humanity and the species and kind of the general ecosystem that we rely on, there isn't a comparison. So that's the first place to start. But that's not good enough, right? Because it's like, all right, we could accept that, but then still, right? And so then it comes down to like, is there a way that we could do this stuff cleaner? And then what are we going to do with the materials at the end of their lifespan? Mm-hmm. And so that, I don't think that the solar industry is all the way there on accepting responsibility for that. And I definitely don't think the government is all the way there on understanding and creating the policies to get that all there. So I'm not going to be the one that says, oh yeah, we thought about that, and don't worry, kind of thing. I think actually there is a bit of a train wreck, in like 20 years that we're headed towards. We don't have it all together. So then this is like the gray area of the climate change fight. I mean, that's just honestly what it is. It's like people like me who run the Solar Rights Alliance, people like you, the solar industry, who I work with a lot, the government, have just got to be very, very serious about this too. And what we can't do is say, we'll worry about that later. Right now we have to, got to get the clean. We got to do it all. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And it is the case that many solar manufacturers do have reclamation programs. They're not detailed enough, so they need to get better. We should push to make them better. There's no conflict in pushing them to make it better. And then with battery storage, right now the batteries run on lithium. Lithium is mined. There are real conflicts with Native American tribes on that stuff. Okay, so what are we going to do? We need those batteries, but also we don't want to be ruining sacred lands. So these are gray areas that we have to be navigating, and we got to be doing them with grace and with also kind of an understanding of what is it that us white people have, already kind of screwed up, Mother Earth with. A lot of gray. The big picture is we need wind, we need geothermal, we need technologies we haven't invented yet, and we desperately need solar, and we have to do it like yesterday. And the implications of climate change are so great that we're going to have to be willing to kind of embrace that gray, and then just really push forward as best we can with as much grace and trust as we have as well.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much for coming. That was a really informative presentation, and I really appreciate you being here, so thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
And if everyone can stay on for just a minute, we have to do a quick vote. We have a slate of candidates that have been that are running for executive board for our club for 2022. I just posted the names in the chat. This is the full list. We had an executive board search committee that put together, and a couple months ago we voted to approve these candidates. So this month it's just a formal vote on up or down whether or not to approve our proposed board of directors for next year. They include myself as president, Suzanne Montegui as vice president of outreach, Ali Sapirman for vice president of operations, Kristen Lynn as treasurer, Vinod Menon for secretary, Michelle Dauber, Pete Daly, Miriam Gosbini, Monica Malone, Alexia Worsham, and Rosie Zepeda, all of those members at large. So I'm making the motion to approve and vote for to elect the 2022 executive board members as listed in the chat.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties raising your hand, you can unmute yourself and state if you approve. Okay, so we have Ed Cobb, Fred, and so we have 9 in favor and several who have not voted. Ed, Fred, and there's an iPhone. I see Fred raising his hand.
That's me, Rosie, with the iPhone. I just logged on.
Okay, so that is everyone voting for the board members as listed in the chat. Thank you everyone for being here. We will not have a general, so the motion passes. We will not have a general meeting for December, so please keep an eye out for an email for the January meeting. Thanks and have a good night.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.